Good morning. The purpose of this video is to walk you through the Chem 100 critical thinking assignment regarding the short essay over the ethics of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. If you've come by this video and you're not a VU student taking Chem 100, I'd encourage you to click out of this. There's nothing really in here that's going to be helpful to you. This is specifically for those taking this class. So what this project looks like, every general education course at Vincennes University has a critical thinking requirement for part of the requirements of the course. Here in Chem 100, that activity is 5% of the overall score for your grade. And our activity looks like this. So here's what you're ultimately going to be asked to do. You are going to be asked to think about this particular concept and part of American history. The Manhattan Project is a U.S. government-led research and development program during World War II that ultimately produced the first nuclear weapons. Major league scientists from all over the world are brought in to develop the technology that ultimately leads to that nuclear bomb. And the policy at the time was that the organizers went out to recruit scientists without really telling them what they were going to be doing until they had agreed to sign on. And once they had signed on, then they were stuck. So what we are asking you to do is go out, find some information on the Manhattan Project, and we want you to approach it from multiple directions, multiple dimensions. And you will be asked to ultimately produce an essay that answers some of these prominent questions. And will be graded on the rubric that I'll show you here in a second. So here are the questions. Would the scientists have signed on to the project if they had been fully aware of what the project was when they were told about it? Would their ethical dimension be brought in? And so what we really want you to do in this first section is we want you to kind of call on what is the issue at stake? Why is it a controversial issue? And would people with full knowledge have still participated? Along those lines, part 2 of your essay is going to be about those positions. So there are two kind of extreme positions that you could take on the issue. Yes, it was morally right to do so, and here's why. No, it is not correct it would not have been correct to sign on to this project, and here's why. Those are kind of the black and white versions, the two extreme positions. And there are obviously positions in between. We are calling those shades of gray. So what you need to look into and what you'll need to kind of do is outline what those extreme positions are, what are the shades of gray, and what kinds of factors would fit into that overall. Now, to help you with this, I have put into action a secondary assignment. This secondary assignment is in your critical thinking assignments tab, is called the preliminary activity, the ethics of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings. And what this is all about is, if you click on this, it'll give you a Word document that you open up. The Word document is just a short little paragraph that you read about some of the ramifications of the bombings themselves. And you go into this activity, and the activity is a series of questions that ask you about the issue, um, the arguments in favor, the arguments against, um, asking you to align your viewpoints, and so on and so forth, and getting into some of the ethics from the perspective of the 8 key questions, which we'll talk about more in a second here. So the purpose of this 8 question activity, first of all, this is a bonus activity. It is not required of you. However, it will be valuable in terms of helping you to organize your thinking and kind of get some of your thoughts on paper initially. So my suggestion is that this is a 5 point bonus activity, um, and you doing it can do nothing but help your overall essay, help your grade on the rest of the assignment. I would encourage you to do it, but I am not going to require it of you. Um, and it should not take you very long to do. The questions here, the essays, they're all short answer. They're all relatively small kinds of things to go after. So that's that particular assignment. So anywhere on this form where it says the preliminary activity, that's what we're referring to. That's that bonus assignment in Blackboard. Um, and you can see we reference it a number of times here because it really does help you with organization. So those are the first couple of questions. So, what are the positions that you can take? What are the factors, social, educational, political, that would have um, led people to these particular positions and impact decision making? So, with this particular problem, there is a considerable social um, from the perspective of the bombing itself. Did the bombing save thousands, if not millions, of military lives at the cost of thousands of civilian lives? Um, there are some ramifications. There are some real tough issues in there. Um, and obviously, they would impact the position one way or the other. If you don't believe that the atomic bomb should have been dropped, then you have to factor in the idea that the brutal island to island, hand to hand combat that was going on in the Pacific Ocean would have potentially waged on for months, if not years. And how many young lives would have been lost in that shuffle? Um, it, it's a hypothetical, yes, but it's one that you'd have to consider. The economic, how much longer could we have funded a war in the Pacific? How much longer, what was the cost of the Manhattan Project? You know, there are lots of pieces in that. From a political standpoint, what did Franklin Delano Roosevelt have to gain from a political standpoint by the development of this bomb? Were there pressures based upon what was happening in Europe, in Nazi Germany, and in Russia, who was our ally, but soon to be our Cold War foe, over the political influences and what the atomic bomb ultimately meant for that political influence? So there are lots of factors. This is a very multifaceted problem. And if you just focus on the one question, I think you kind of miss some of those other things. This isn't just about, was the bombing justified? It's, why would you justify it, or why would you denounce it? And what other kinds of factors kind of fit into that? Question 4 is all about ethics. This is an ethical essay in addition to critical thinking. And there are some guiding questions that go along in here, from ideas of core beliefs, perspectives, um, personal assumptions that are being made, what values are being upheld. These all speak to something called the 8 key questions. And for the 8 key questions, I'm going to again throw it over to Blackboard, because we can look at the 8 key questions a little bit more closely in that regard there. So I actually clicked on the wrong thing. Hold on. Pause record. So with regard to the 8 key questions, you can see that I have put a link here in the essay materials with regard to the 8 key questions. If you click on this, it'll download a PDF for you. The PDF looks like this. And what you get in it is the 8 key questions were developed by James Madison University as 8 dimensions by which we can look at ethical thinking from the standpoint of rights, fairness, outcomes, responsibilities, character, liberty, empathy, and authority. And so if you read through this, the pages here give a sense of what each of those terms mean. Fairness. What is the fair, just thing to do? How can we act equitably and treat others fairly or equally? But what does that mean? How does that look in a strategy as far as ethics are concerned? Now, something to know with regard to these 8 key questions, and I'll scroll and show you kind of each one of them is given some detail here. By no means are you to use or try to explain all 8 of them. Not all 8 of them will fit the context of this particular problem. In fact, some of them are going to be pretty close to irrelevant to the problem. So when it comes to the 8 key questions, what you really want to get after is what are the ones that apply the most to this? What ones apply the most? And then you write about those. So don't get caught up in, oh, I've got to answer all 8 of these. Get caught up in the, how do I address this? Which of these seem to be more sense-making than others? And that's going to go a long way toward helping you. So once you get through the ethical dimension, then we're going to put the shoe on your foot. Put yourself in the shoes of a Manhattan Project scientist. You get approached by this person. You're a prominent scientist in your field. You're asked to participate in this project. Would you have? What factors lead you to say yes or no? What are the advantages? What would concern you? And based on what you say in response to question 5, question 6 is going to have a different tone for each of you. If everyone had taken your position, what would the impact on the Manhattan Project have been? So if you refuse, and therefore refuse for all scientists, what would be different today? Obviously, we would not have dropped the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but we also would have never developed it in the first place, or at least not developed it until quite some time later. Assuming all other things are even and equal, let's assume that World War II gets won eventually. and the war stops, what does that mean? What are the ramifications? You know, does Europe look the same way that it does now? Does our influence as a world power continue to remain, or is it does it subside in some kind of way? Now, there is no correct or incorrect answer to this. I'm not fishing for a specific response. When you submit your essay, I'm going to, especially if you submit a draft, I'm going to try to push you in terms of making your arguments better. You are going to have to do some research though. In that research, you're going to need to pull some information from reputable sources. So that does not include, or that does not take us away from online resources. There are lots of great online resources out there, but stay away from some of the ones that definitely cause the most problems. Things like Wikipedia or other ones where anybody can write anything and influence anybody based on that. So the problem with Wikipedia, yes, you get a lot of good information in there, but because it's editable, there's no telling when or if something was edited and how good the information could be. You don't want to pin your entire hopes on what could be somebody else's opinion, or someone who's just messing around on the internet and putting out misinformation. So use the library, use the databases, use reputable sources like magazines, or other kinds of media for this. Overall, this is an essay. It is not just a series of answers to the question. The essay needs to be at minimum 2 pages, but probably should be somewhere in the 3 to 4 page range if we really want to get into it. To do all of this, to answer all of these questions correctly, it's probably going to take that much. You need to write it in a format that is readable in Blackboard. So Microsoft Word or a PDF would be preferred here. Use good sense with regard to formatting, 1-inch margins, a readable font like Times New Roman or Calibri, Arial, something along those lines, 12 point, not too big, not too small, easy line spacing. And again, 4 references in minimum. And you have to have a bibliography. So the deadlines here, we're going into a break period. I recognize that. I want you to, this is the only assignment I'm giving you over the entire break, is to work on this. So there is, for the preliminary activity, it is due the Tuesday night, the night that break ends. It is due in Blackboard by the end of the 1st, which would be that Tuesday night. I am encouraging you, not requiring, but encouraging you to work on this over time, submit a rough draft into Blackboard. The place to submit that is going to be right here, the one that says critical thinking essay. Click on that. It'll give you a place to submit. That's where you need to submit. Anyone who submits a rough draft over break, I will give your comments back to you by that Wednesday, the 2nd. Probably, hopefully a little bit sooner, depending upon when you submit. But the final due date here is December 4th. So again, I'm encouraging you to submit a little bit early to get some feedback from me so that you can use that feedback to make it better. But if you want to wait until the last minute or until we're back from break to work on this, that is your prerogative. It has to be in by the end of the day on the 4th, however. And so the only other thing to talk about here is the rubric itself. The rubric itself is in Blackboard. And looks like this. So you can see that the entire breakdown here, you've got 6 points for the introduction. You've got 15 points for your evidence broken into two 7.5 point sections. You've got 9 points for the biases and influences. So looking at that from the multiple dimensions, not just from the, is this good or bad, but, you know, what are the economic, what are the political, what are the social ramifications, and so on. 15 points for your position, 10 points for your conclusions and the ramifications, 10 points for the grammar and spelling, and 10 points for utilizing at least 3 of the 8 key questions. So again, not looking for all 8 here, I'm looking for 3. Pick the 3 that make the most sense, that have the most out there for you, and use them. Talk about them, get into kind of all of the dimensions in depth on them. That'll go a long way toward helping. So that is your critical thinking project. That is what I want you to work on over the weekend. If you have any questions, send me an email, text me over Remind, do whatever it is you need to do. Don't wait until we're back on campus again or back meeting again for class to start asking questions, because by then it'll be a little bit too late. So that's all I had. Have a good afternoon.